They actually take the profits that are made from their massive industry, their massive corporations around the world, and they divide them up between it's everyone in the quorum of the 70. And it doesn't say, and actually the business site of the Mormon Church is actually, I was talking to someone who was a former missionary, who's now a socialist, who realized, just had this huge, like when he was reading the church business page, just this huge like revelation, I guess a real one, about how they actually function, which is they take all these profits and they divide them up among the quorum of the 70. No one knows how. They don't say how. They assume that it's divided up, so it's hierarchically based on who actually is in what position within the quorum of the 70. So it shouldn't be surprising that so many people in the quorum of the 70 have business degrees and are related to each other. So the reality is, it seems to me that at least whatever the church originally was, right now it has, whereas you might have other religions like the Catholic religion, or like maybe some some floaty, like Protestant religions here and there that have a direct connection with their congregation because they actually have to get money from them. They have to get tithing. The Mormon Church makes way more money off its corporations than it ever did its tithing, which is why it has absolutely no interest in what you think whatsoever, in my opinion, on any political issue. They have their own issues. So as far as the leadership, I understand where you're coming from the congregation, but I've also found that this is one of the reasons they treat poor people so badly, and so many poor people that I've known have quit the church, But at any rate, as far as their origins though, I did want to say that I think there's a bit of a mythology about the United Order, which is that it was some kind of it was this communist thing. I don't believe that's the case. I think it was much more like what you can actually find when they talk about the Pilgrims when they came over from Europe. They started things that were very similar. In reality, this is about capitalist accumulation. When you first start up in a place, it begins with agriculture, right? It doesn't preclude private property, which it didn't at the time of the United Order. The United Order was actually much more conservative than a lot of the Pilgrim experiments in the 1600s in the United States, precisely because it wasn't the 1600s. They weren't coming from a revolutionary wars in Europe. So when the United Order came into Utah, this is the way that they actually built up the basic basis of capitalism in Utah, with no help from anyone. And if you want to know the truth, Brigham Young had more money. Like the way that they judged Brigham Young's wealth was whatever the church's wealth was, because there was no way to divide between the two. The amount of wealth that man had was astronomical. So I don't know. So I guess my point is, I understand where you're coming from when it comes to talking to congregation, but when it comes to the Mormon Church, I just don't see the same kind of possibilities. Like I know in Latin America, there's like liberation theology. You have like a lot of the meetings had to go through Catholic Church because that was the only thing that was illegally allowed to exist under dictatorships. But it seems to me like under the current structure with the Mormon Church, it's impossible to do anything within the Mormon Church precisely because they have more ties to capital than they do to people. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, again, I just don't know how a lot of stuff works. So if you want to pass that book on, I'd be happy to look at it. But I just can't even really comment just because I don't have any more background than like what you're telling me. So I don't want to like confirm. Oh, really? That's how it really works? Oh, thanks, Mike, for telling me. But at the same time, I don't have information to the contrary, so I just can't really comment.
Sorry, perhaps maybe on a little more positive note, and I don't know if you want to talk about this on camera or off camera, or now that I just mentioned that, I cast suspicion on you. What is your concrete, you are a socialist, of which I include anarchists. What are your concrete plans to mobilize the left in the church?
We've just been starting to do a little bit more of that, and that's why it's been nice to come to RSU meetings and things like that. Before coming, I just didn't have any idea about how to do that really. And so we're trying through the Mormon Worker to actually start up, like, not just printing a newspaper, but to have an actual, organization, getting members, trying to have obviously get more members, actively get involved in different, struggles and things like that. Just in conjunction with like other groups that are doing stuff. And so, we had a meeting today. I was just at a more worker meeting for a couple hours right before I came here. So we're trying to move in the direction of actually building like an organization or a party, so to speak. And hopefully I won't be such a slacker as I have been over the last few years. But for, again, a lot of years, it's like, obviously I was pissed about the war, I was pissed about how things go generally, pissed about the views of most Mormons around here. And all I could really think to do was like, well, just, print the newspaper, at least gain some ground in trying to articulate some of the progressive or leftist ideas that are actually in, the books, but that don't get paid attention to, or that nobody cares about currently. So at least in the ideas of Mormons, at least they can kind of feel like, oh, well, hey, there is like a socialist tradition or heritage in Mormonism, even though it's small, even though it's not the dominant tradition, obviously, but at least it's there and articulates some of those arguments to give people who are Mormon, just like it would have been really helpful for me when I was younger and trying to figure out this stuff, if I had been able to pick up a book about Mormon anarchism rather than just having to kind of like muck through it and try to figure it out myself, just like Corey Bushman and Tyler Bushman had to muck through it and kind of figure it out themselves and everyone else. At least establish like an ideological foundation of sorts, but definitely we haven't accomplished much of anything in terms of getting anything organized, and so that's hopefully, we talked about that in the radio interview a little bit.
Take Josh's question, then we should wrap things up.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you think the best way to agitate to Mormons is. I mean, where, like, should you talk about these things at church? Should you be going to like firesides and things like that? I can't remember all this stuff, but. And I mean, also, do you have like some sort of, do you have like a pamphlet or something that, you think is just like a good little argument for the connection between Mormonism and socialism that you can just hand out to people? Just kind of your thoughts on how to...
Yeah, we don't have pamphlets. We've been using the newspaper in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I always have copies of the newspaper around, and so I'll be trying to give them to people or, put them in places where people can pick them up, or obviously people can read online, things like that. Probably we're trying to get our website revamped, and so there's going to be some like permanent content, because right now it's just articles which are really scattered, and so on the website we're trying to get updated, having like some permanent content that just like explains some of these kind of like basic connections and principles, and then trying to go to conferences, like if they're academic conferences and things like that, and give presentations. There's a couple different conferences every year like that. There's one in California coming up next year where there's actually a lot of the big academics in the church, or at least the famous academics in the church, and we know some people, so we should be able to have 3 or 4 people from our newspaper give a presentation there, which should be helpful, just because that's where the at least influential academics like Richard Bushman, he's actually putting the conference on. So I don't know, like I said, I don't have like any like awesome ideas about how to do all this stuff. I mean, we do what we can, but.
Would you ever be down for going door to door, putting those missionary skills to work?
Man, I hated that. Yeah, I really hated that, but yeah, I guess I would probably have to agree to do that. We had thought about going around, and I've done this a little bit in the past, like just walk around and put flyers on people's doors. I used to do that around Provo, make up flyers with just like like anti-war statements from the scriptures and things like that, and tape them on people's doors. And probably need to just do that with extra copies of the newspaper, just hand them out. And we're hoping to expand to this next issue, the Mormon Worker. We're going to have a Spanish section where there's going to be 75% in English, 25% in Spanish, or something like that, so we can start putting those newspapers in Mexican grocery stores or wherever else we can. That's another thing that would be nice with like the SB 1070 stuff. is to maybe do some door-to-door, trying to organize or round people up to come to demonstrations and things like that, being able to pass out flyers. You know, maybe, you know, have like a pamphlet in Spanish about up from a Mormon perspective as well, in case people who come across happen to be Mormon and they're Hispanic. So definitely, yeah, a lot of stuff that could be done. Hopefully, we'll do a better job of.
All right. Well, thank you, Will, for presenting today.
Thanks, guys.